Ents have charged out of Fangorn Forest to face the Goblin menace. Will their strength be enough? You're watching Conquest Creations. Jacob Lucas here with you. Today we have a matchup of polar opposites. An army of Ents led by Treebeard versus a Goblin Town horde led by the Goblin King. This will be an exciting game. Let's go and meet our players. I am Ent Jacob. Since I've been in lockdown, the trees in my yard have given me solace. I decided what better way to show the trees love than to make an army of them. I'm Goblin Town Jacob. I'm here to take this seriously. The Ent army list today is pretty simple. It's Treebeard with Merry and Pippin, then Quickbeam leading one Ent and Beachbone leading one Ent for a total of 7 models. The enemy army looks like the kind of list that someone that just wants to have a bit of fun would play, and that's not what I'm here to do today. It's not going to be a problem for my goblins to cut down these Ents. The bludgeon rule is key here. If an Ent is fighting multiple opponents, rather than striking, he may pick up one enemy model and use it as a club. He deals strength 8 hits to the model that's been picked up and to one other model that the Ent is fighting. If he successfully kills that model that he targets, then the Ent may do this again until either it fails to kill a target or it kills all of its opponents. This means an Ent can kill a lot of goblins in one turn. The Goblin army is a horde of 93 models led by the Goblin King. Alongside with him he has Grinner, the Goblin Scribe, a regular Goblin Town captain, and 2 Goblin mercenary captains, each leading a warband of 7 mercenaries, and finally, Golem. This is an awesome army with heaps of conversions in it. All of the mercenaries have been converted from Moria Goblins and Morannon Orcs, and the Goblin King has been converted to wear full battle armor. These goblins are ready for war. I think the terror is going to be my saving grace though. The goblins have a courage of 2, so won't be able to charge me a lot of the time. I know my opponent really well, so hopefully I can predict what moves he is going to make. A lot of people take Goblin Town and they just charge forwards and hope for the best. That's not happening today. Goblin Town is really about positioning. There might be 93 models, but they die quickly if I misplay them. If they die quickly, I'll break. If I break, everything runs away. The scenario today is going to be to the death. It's going to be on this 4x4 board that holds the ruins of an ancient Numenorian city. This board is dense with terrain and there's heaps of scatter terrain. There are plenty of places for the Goblin Town mercenaries to arrive, but the terrain may bottleneck the goblins a bit. To score points, you must wound the enemy leader for 1 point or kill them for 3 points. If you break the enemy, you score 3 points. If you remain unbroken, you instead score 5. Having a banner can score you points, but neither army has one. Finally, you get an extra 2 points if you quarter your enemy, and that is when the game ends. First warband going down is going to be the Goblin King. I think this stuff is all going to be pretty straightforwards. The goblins deployed in a big long line across the front, and the Ents responded the exact same way. The Goblin Scribe was hidden behind a wall so that it was totally safe no matter what, and more Ents just dropped down in their line. And the horde of goblins just continues growing. There's so many of them on the board, and there's only 5 Ents. Alright, well, first turn priority. Good luck. Starting off with a win. There's nothing surprising about the turn 1 goblin movement. Everything just runs forwards. No marches were called, but I don't think that that's a bad thing because they've still got plenty of time to get there. Now the Goblin Scribe is really cool. If he passes a courage test, he can bring the difference plus D3 amount of goblins on from any board edge. Unfortunately, turn 1 he failed, and the Ents, they just stayed still. Now this was really interesting. I wonder what Ent Jacob has planned. I have a trick up my sleeve that I think my opponent's forgotten about. In turn 2, all of the goblins kept pushing forwards, but this time the Goblin Scribe managed to pass his courage test, so there's a handful of goblins that will be coming on the board from behind the Ents. I'm gonna roll a courage test for each of my goblin mercenary warbands. And they both come on. Awesome. Goblin mercenaries are such a cool unit. They can deploy from turn 2 onwards in any piece of terrain on the board. So the first warband is going in these ruins and the next warband is going in this building. These guys are so powerful. They're perfect for grabbing objectives, or in this case they're just going to be tying up the Ents so that they can't move and that they can't throw their stones. This is what we're looking like after turn 2 movement. Those goblins are getting close fast. Alright, all my Ents have stayed still, so I'm going to throw my throwing stones into the Goblin King. The Ents are throwing their stones at the Goblin King because he's going to be the one who can kill the Ents the fastest. Now the Goblin King has a special rule called Blubbery Mass. On a 3+, he ignores any wound. This makes him super durable. The Ents manage 2 wounds here, and the Goblin King fails 1 Blubbery Mass, but passes it with fate, so he's unwounded. Not gonna lie, I wasn't expecting the throwing stones. I kind of forgot about it. I gotta keep the Goblin King safe because he wants to be a lumberjack today. Turn 3, goblins have priority again, and everything is just running forwards. The goblin mercenaries that came in are charging into the Ents. They have to pass a courage test in order to charge. Now they have a courage of 2, which isn't very high, so a lot of the times, like this time, they will fail. This is one of the big things that's going to keep the Ents safe throughout this game. But as soon as the goblins have tied up each of these Ents, they're just running in to support their goblins. All goblins count as having spears if they're supporting one of their friends. This means you can get a lot of attacks in combat pretty easily, despite failing most of the courage tests. On the other side, they're going in again and manage to fail the first courage test, pass the second one, so one goblin is going to charge in and tie up Treebeard and one of the Ents. That's so frustrating for the Ent player because it's just one tiny goblin. And then down the bottom, one more goblin has passed their courage test who's going to tie up Quick Beam. This means that there's no Ent movement this turn, and unsurprisingly in the combat phase all of those goblins just get wiped. The goblins tying up my Ents this turn was annoying, but I am glad I was able to wipe them. Any kills for me are very important. And I've interrupted the game just briefly to talk about the Conquest Creation web store. I sell a bunch of resin 3D printed miniatures as well as custom made bases, and I also offer commissions. You can commission an army just like one of the ones in this video, or any of the other ones that you see in my gallery. The prices start at about $10 Australian per model. Also, if you guys could leave a like and leave a comment telling me which faction you want to see in a battle report next, I'll respond to every single comment and hopefully get your factions onto the channel as soon as possible. And please remember to subscribe. It does actually help the channel grow a lot, and it helps me create more Middle-earth content. The Ents had priority this time and no heroics were called. They've decided to go after all of the goblins that they can now. They want to get as many casualties in early as possible because they know that when the goblins break, they are going to run for it. All the goblins keep pushing forward. Those goblins are closing in quick. Damn. Alright, no shooting. Let's get to fighting. In the fight phase, the first Ent manages to take off 2 goblins with ease. The other Ents around the board go through killing, and Quickbeam tries to bludgeon but only manages to get 1. And Treebeard actually loses his combat and decides it's definitely worth not spending the might, so he is just gonna back up. It's a bit embarrassing for him. I don't want to be arrogant, but my goblins know what is up. Treebeard is an easy beat. And finally, Beachbone takes out a goblin. The regular Ent takes out some more goblins. In the goblin move, they all have to pass a courage test if they want to charge. That means that in this game, a lot of courage tests were rolled. Oh my god, when I started, I did not realize how many dice I would need to roll for this matchup. Plenty of the goblins managed to get in, but there was one Ent that was left unengaged because the goblins near him failed his courage test. Oh my god, this hurl is gonna be so good. You got lazy in your movement, and this is gonna hurt you really bad. Grinner is going to call a heroic strike against Treebeard. Hopefully I can chip some wounds off him. This is interesting. So is it worth me striking with Treebeard? I'm fight 8 base. You'll fight 3. You go up d6. You need a 5 or 6 to match or beat me. Treebeard's going to save his might, and he's not going to call a heroic strike. Grinner only got a 4, so his heroic strike didn't get high enough to beat Treebeard. But he got a 6 and Treebeard didn't. So Treebeard ended up using a point of might to win, and he's going to bludgeon using Grinner. The first strike was a success, The second strike was a success, and the third one was a failure. This means that Grinner now has to take 3 strength 8 hits, which deals 2 wounds. If Grinner passes his fate, he will survive, and on a 4, he does it. That bludgeon could have gone better, but look, overall, I'm happy with that. This Ent is fighting next. The Ent managed to get a 6, so the goblins don't even need to roll. Now to hurl, he adds the difference in his strength, plus D3. This means that goblin's going back 7 inches, and he's going to hit 10 other goblins. That's massive. Oh man, this hurl feels so bad. This is a lazy error. Oh. Alright, let's roll to see how much damage this does. Fail, it's alright. Knocked prone still. Fail, that's alright, knocked prone. Success, there's 1 dead goblin. And then fail. Alright. Fail. Getting unlikely. Fail. Okay, getting really unlikely. Fail again. Even getting unlikelier. Yep, another fail. This is just an absolute oh, another fail and... Oh, yep, another fail. Wow, okay. That was 10 rolls and 1 4-up. What the hell? 10 dice and only 1 4+? What? Oh, that's so frustrating. Alright. This Ent fighting 3 goblins. Highest of a 2. And Quick Beam fighting 1 goblin. Gets the 6. And 3 6s to kill 1 goblin. Alright, got him. Priority this turn once again goes to the goblins, and they start out by moving out of the king's way. He passes his courage test and he charges in to one of the regular Ents. Alright, that is not good that the Goblin King made it in with a plain Ent. I think I might be taking casualties this turn. Next, the goblins all around the field make very, very, very above average courage tests, meaning that a lot of them actually manage to charge into the Ents. This is Quick Beam getting surrounded. Now, the goblins also charge into Treebeard, managing just to tie him up and hopefully chip some wounds off, and Beachbone is also surrounded. Beachbone's actually happy about that because he gets to reroll failed wounds against goblins, orcs, and urukai, and these goblins are going to get bludgeoned. Now, the Goblin King has declared a heroic strike against the regular Ent, and he's only rolled a 2, but that takes him to fight 8, which is high enough. The Goblin King and the Ent roll off, and the Goblin King gets the 6 with the heroic strike. That means that he is going to win this fight. And he's piercing struck and he's two-handed burly, so he only needs 4s to wound. And the Ent is trapped, so he rolls twice and he gets 3 wounds, which is enough to take down that Ent. It's a big deal losing an Ent this early in the game. Now, the Ents fighting, this is Quick Beam. He gets a highest of a 5 and he's surrounded by a lot of goblins who get the 6, so he is going to use 1 point of might to boost that and win that fight. This is what the Ents save their might for, is just preventing botches. And he's using the bludgeon special rule, so he needs a 3+ to kill these goblins, and if he gets a 3 he keeps going, and he's doing really, really well here, and he's just killed 7 goblins in 1 turn. That is phenomenal. That's exactly what the bludgeon rule is for. And Beachbone gets a 6. Bludgeoning again, gets a 1, but he can re-roll failed wounds, and he is up to 3 wounds so far. 4 wounds, and then that deals 4 hits to the target of the bludgeon, which will also kill them, so he takes down 5 goblins this turn. The Ents are racking up their kills. And Treebeard also scores 5 kills, making the Ent kill count seriously high. That was brutal. I managed to get the first Ent down, but those bludgeons wrecked me. I think I need to play a bit more carefully and use my spear supporting rule as much as possible. I also have Golem, who's getting closer to the front now, and he's going to really help taking down these Ents. And the priority roll once again goes to the goblins. They've really had priority this turn. Again, there was a whole bunch of courage tests to pass, and a few goblins got in on the Ent on the side. Against Quick Beam, 3 goblins managed to get into base contact with him after heaps of courage tests. And against Quick Beam, the Goblin King uses a point of will to pass his courage test to charge, and 2 other goblins get the trap. The Goblin King calls a heroic strike, scores a 6, but botches only getting a 4. He's got a Goblin Captain who gets a 2, and a regular Goblin who gets a 1, and Quick Beam gets the 5. The Goblin Captain doesn't might it because he knows that if he mites it, Quick Beam will use a might, then the Goblin King will be out of might, and Quick Beam will still be safe. And after some rolling, Quick Beam does 1 wound to the Goblin King. He fails his Blubbery Mass save, so he takes a wound. Now, elsewhere on the board, we have this Ent fighting against 3. He scores a 6, so the Goblins don't even need to roll. He bludgeons, because it's always better to bludgeon if you're against 3 opponents, but fails on the first roll, so just ends up killing 1 Goblin. We also have Beachbone to go. Now, he rolls, and he gets a 5 high, which is decent, and the Goblins have 6 dice to get a 6 first roll. They're only on 5, and they don't get the 6, so Beachbone has won that fight. Strikes normally, forgets to reroll the wound, and kills 2 Goblins. Then Treebeard manages to kill 3 Goblins. And this is what the dead pile's looking like at the moment. It's 36 Goblins. It's not looking good. 36 Goblins dead is a solid effort. I just need to get to 47, and then they're broken, and they'll start to flee. And here's the roll for priority. It goes to Goblins again, and there is a bunch more courage tests. Wow, this was a interesting matchup for how many courage tests I had to do. And they all move into the Ents, just tying them down, trying to get around them, trying to get those traps. And also they're just trying to leave one model in and then spear support it so you get the same amount of attacks but without the bludgeoning opportunity. Now the Goblin King passes his courage test and he decides to go into Treebeard rather than Quick Beam. Now, in the combat phase, Quick Beam calls a heroic combat because the Goblin King has called a strike. Quick Beam kills his opponent, which was the Goblin Mercenary Captain, and he is going to charge into the Goblin King, pulling him off of Treebeard so that Treebeard is going to be safe. Now, Quick Beam is fighting against the Goblin King. The Goblin King gets a 6, and because of his strike, it took him up to 10, so he is going to win that fight. And once again, wounding on 4s because he's piercing struck, and does 2 wounds to Quick Beam, so Quick Beam has 1 left with 1 fate point. And Treebeard wins his fight on a 6, and there's a whole bunch more dice rolls for bludgeoning, killing 1, 2, 3 goblins as well as the target, so he kills 4 goblins. And Beachbone fights, gets a 6 to win the fight, and kills 3 goblins. Nice and easy. Finally, the last Ent loses his fight to 4 goblins, and they manage to get a 6, dealing 1 wound to him. Not gonna lie, I was expecting things to be going a little bit better at this point in the game. The casualties are getting up there, but Golem is going in next turn, and I'm gonna try to kill Treebeard. It's the Goblin priority again somehow, and the Goblins are just taking heaps of courage tests to charge in, and the Goblin King gets into Treebeard. Importantly, so does Golem, and Golem has put the ring on, and Golem, when he charges an enemy, that enemy's fight value is halved in the fight phase, meaning that Treebeard is only fight 4. Even if he strikes up to 10, it goes back down to 5. This is massive. It means that Treebeard's in a lot of trouble. Quick Beam and the other Ent get attacked by a handful of goblins each. And here is Treebeard. He's surrounded, in a lot of trouble, and Quick Beam behind him is just tied up by 1 goblin. The other Ents are fighting a mini swarm each, but the swarm of goblins has gotten a lot smaller. Starting with Treebeard, he gets a 5 high. Now, that would be decent, but the Goblin King is going to score a 6, and there's nothing that Treebeard can do. Even with his points of might, he's still a lower fight. So all of the regular goblins roll to wound, and they don't manage anything with their first round. Treebeard's trapped, so they try again, scoring 2 6s and 1 4. They need 6 by 4s to wound, and there's a wound. Golem fails to wound, and the Goblin King manages 3 wounds, and Treebeard's fate, he fails 2. Even with might, it's not enough to make him survive that, and he goes down. Merry and Pippin are replaced because they were on his back. Now Merry and Pippin are in a lot of trouble there. Merry and Pippin are going to have their final stand. They are not going to go down without a... The other Ent fights unsurprisingly, wins the fight and bludgeons more goblins to death, killing just 2 or 3 this time. And Quickbeam is surrounded. He gets a 5 and the goblins get a 6, but he's going to use a point of might to win that, so he's safe and goes around bludgeoning and rerolls and kills another goblin and takes many of them out. And the goblins are low on numbers. In fact, they are broken now. This is not good for the goblins. I broke the goblins. Next turn will be hilarious. I managed to kill most of their captains, so there's going to be a lot of goblins running away. And priority this turn once again goes to the goblins. This is crazy, they just keep winning it. Now, because they are broken, they're going to need to pass courage test, but the Goblin King is a hero of legend, so he auto passes, and then he passes a terror check to charge into Quick Beam. Not a good sign for Quick Beam. Now, all the goblins within 6 inches of him pass, and Golem also gets a stand fast. A lot of those goblins are safe. On the other side, did a whole bunch of courage tests. Now, a goblin with courage 2 has to pass a courage test twice in a row if they want to first stay on the board and then charge an Ent. Unsurprisingly, a lot of goblins ran away here. In fact, in total, it was 26 goblins that fled the battlefield. Now, this is definitely a result from poor playing on my part with the goblins. I should have kept their captains safe. Instead, I had them fighting against the Ents, which was just ridiculous. They didn't need to fight against the Ents. They weren't going to contribute anything, so they should have stayed safe. Unsurprisingly, Merry is killed, and Golem had called a heroic combat, so those goblins can move and fight again. Golem passes a terror check to charge into Quick Beam, and Golem with the ring on halves the fight value, so Quick Beam is in a lot of trouble there. And Pippin loses the fight, but he actually manages to survive this, which is very lucky, and it means the Ents can't be broken this turn, even if Quick Beam dies. So, Quick Beam gets a 4 high, which isn't looking good. The Goblin King gets a 6, and there's a whole bunch of dice to come out here. The Goblin Warriors, Golem, and then the Goblin King's the one that does it, dealing 4 wounds. Now we have one Ent fighting one Goblin. The Ent wins the fight, and unsurprisingly, that Goblin does not survive. Losing a lot of goblins to courage really sucked, but it's not the end of the world. I just need to kill a few more models, and then the game is over, and I'll win because the enemy leader is dead. And into the next turn, the priority roll once again goes to the goblins. What is happening here? They've won almost every single one of them. And courage test for the Goblin King passes easily. That's good because he is definitely at risk of failing, and he's going to take another courage test to charge into Beachbone. And success once again. Courage 3 isn't great, but it's been working for the Goblin King so far this game. Now, there's a lot more courage tests still to go. It's just measuring his stand fast range there. And Golem takes courage test and passes and charges into Pippin. And the goblins around the Goblin King don't charge Beachbone. Instead, they just stand close to trap him. This is a good trick if you're playing against terrifying models. And you can see that Pippin's trapped. And a whole bunch more goblins flee the battlefield. Now, into the combat phase, Pippin is in trouble and Beachbone is in trouble. Although Beachbone does have a higher fight, and there is one free Ent. The goblins are quartered after this phase, so this is the last turn of the game. Pippin gets a 6 in the combat phase, but it's not enough because the goblins also get a 6, and obviously golems there providing them with the fight value. And they roll to wound, and that's enough to take him down. Alright, now this is important. We have Beachbone fighting the King. Beachbone is on a 4, and the King is on a 5. Now Beachbone's out of might. It's been chipped down over the past few turns, and the King manages to do 4 wounds there and take down Beachbone. That means that the goblins are quartered and the Ents are quartered. This is what the battlefield looks like. The game is now over. We just need to tally up points and find out who won. Alright, it was a close game with many twists and turns and many flukes of luck. But Fangorn broke their enemy. Goblin Town also broke the Ents. Now, Fangorn managed to wound the Goblin King, whereas Goblin Town managed to kill Treebeard. Goblin Town didn't have a banner, and neither did Fangorn. And both armies managed to quarter each other. This means that Fangorn finished the game with 6 victory points, and Goblin Town finished the game with a total score of 8, getting them the victory. Unfortunately, it was a loss for the Ents, but it was pretty good. I managed to kill a lot of goblins. I'm keen for my next game playing Ents, hopefully against a different opponent. Nothing better than getting a win. Honestly, it wasn't the smashing win that I was hoping for or expecting, but what can I say? You know, I know my opponent is a great player. I just hope I don't have to go up against him in a tournament, because he seems to be able to read what my plays are going to be really, really well. Good job to him.